Hello.
Yeah, that's your name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good. Deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass, and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's some deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
when you're
the ghost,
275 pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah,
You know,
he's like,
he's up there slapping it, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's right. I know.
How did you say his name?
Hervé Villagers. Remember this?
You know what pert near means.
If you know what pert near means and you live in America, you're a redneck too.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pert Near Outdoors.
It's that time of year. It's that time of year where we all need to be thinking about, do we have everything we need to hit the woods? Chances are you don't, and if you think you do, you probably could use some more. So how about you go over to thehuntworks.com and check out all the incredible products these guys are carrying. This is a great family, local store. Dan and Steve Dunnigan, a couple hardworking sumbitches. They are now carrying archery equipment, everything from bows to arrows to broadheads, quivers, you name it. So on top of all the great tree stands and box blinds that they're carrying, they're now a full-on archery dealer, and really recommend that you check these guys out for your next big purchase. Head over to thehuntworks.com to see what they've got for sale, or if you're local in the Rochester area, head on over to their store in East Rochester on Dispatch Drive and check them out. They are on social media, The Huntworks, and also online, like I said. And if you purchase anything online, you can use promo code FEEDIN'Em to get 5% off. And that's FEED, FEEDIN, INUM, 5% off. Feed 'em. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Pert Near Outdoors podcast. This is a good one. This one is going to be featuring our new executive host, Big Willy, and he's really taken over the reins here, which we really appreciate. He's helping me keep the content coming, and so this podcast is with Cal Hasler. Cal is a new friend of the show. Met him through Russ Henches, our buddy that is our brewing master, our brew master, we'll call him. I don't think he's met that level yet, but Russ is our brewer up at Windy Brew, and Cal is his good friend. They taught together and have done some hunting trips, and Cal joined us last year when we did one of our group hunts over the holiday hunt, and I knew of Cal, kind of met him in passing, but never spent much time with him. And when we were breaking the group huddle to end the hunt up at the trucks, Cal, started pimping his business and giving everybody business cards, and didn't know that he was doing any of this stuff with Habitat, or that he was even in that realm of things. Didn't know him that well, and so Cal handed out his business cards, and so Dad was interested in having somebody come out to camp, and Cal had reached out and wanted to do a podcast with us. So Dad said, "Hey, why don't you meet me up at camp, and we'll do a walk and see what things look like." And so that's what they did. So this is a pretty unique show. Haven't heard many done like this. They're going to sit down at the cabin, break down a little history of the property, a history of the camp, some things that we've been working on, that Dad and Uncle Mike in particular have been working on over the years that they've owned the property. And then they're going to walk the property, and Cal's going to share some of his thoughts on what he's seeing as kind of an eye from someone who's not been there, has not spent time there, does not know how the deer move on a day-to-day. He's just looking at it from his perspective, which is really valuable. So, we've done a lot of, I think, really good podcasts and content with Ben Williams and John Teeter, and I think it's just great to add on another individual to this group of smart property managers that we have in Ben and John, and they've both kind of gone off and they're doing big things themselves with their own podcasts, and think it's pretty cool to connect with another guy locally here. Can never have too many of them out there, and it's a good time. So I think you'll enjoy the chat. Oh my God, my daughter's crying. There's just never a minute, guys. There's just never a minute. I'll just let her cry. We'll just cry it out. Oh, it's getting closer. She wants more milky, I think is what she's saying. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to get to the Shed Fest talk real quick. It is, oh, for God's sakes. All right, I'll be right back. All right, oh my God. Case in point, folks, this is why I have been really struggling to get content out, is because every waking moment that those children are awake from about 6 a.m. until about 8:30 p.m., your Eastern time, but I mean, it could be any time. The sons of guns are just on your hip, and they just need your attention. So I'm tired, and that's it. So anyway, so Shed Fest, we are basically 1 week away. Sunday, the 23rd of April, we'll be doing our Shed Fest event at Windy Brew, noon to 4. So hopefully you will join us there if you're local. If you join us and you have some sheds you'd like to have physically scored that day, you can bring any sheds or any horns that you want to have Dallas and Ben score. Officially, they could put them in the books, give you an actual score if you'd like them. Deadheads or sheds or anything, whatever. Those guys just like to put tape to horn. But we're going to have separate categories the day of at the event for best match, best side, best deadhead from sheds found this year. They could be, if you found them since January 1, we will count them as sheds found this year, even if they are, year-old sheds or 2-year-old sheds if you found something older. So bring those with. It's an interactive event. We want to have a little showcase of what people are finding out there. And we're going to have some raffles. We're going to have some door raffles or floor raffles, I guess you call them. I'm going to have a CVA Wolf muzzle loader sitting right here on the table in front of me. That will be one of the raffle items. We're going to have another Millennium tree stand and stick combo that will raffle that. So each of those will be $10 to enter, and then we're going to get a ground blind as well from the Huntworks to raffle. So we've got a ground blind and probably a turkey decoy to go with that. So that'll be the other. Those will all be $10 entries. So you will sell 52 chances at those on a cardboard. And that's how we're going to raffle those items. And then we're going to have door prizes. So everyone who is there will get a door prize ticket, and we'll have a table full of goodies. And then as far as the prizes for the categories of the sheds or horns scored in person on Sunday, those there'll be some good packages there. I haven't put them all together finally, but I've got a long list of all the stuff that we're getting, whether that we're purchasing or has been donated. So we've gonna have some good prizes there, and really hope to have a fun event. And then the guys from the Deer Association, Sean Burdick and his crew, will be up from the Upper Genesee branch, and they'll be doing some of their board. I forget what the hell the game boards that they have, where we will go around and sell a deck of cards, and it'll be like a $10 or $20 entry, depending on the value of the prize on the board. And the boards are covered with 5 or 10 different items that you can pick from. Whatever you win, you can pick anything from pistols to shotguns to scopes to, I think there was some Yeti coolers on there, DeWalt drill sets, things like that. So kind of a cool little smorgasbord of options that you can pick from. So this will be our second annual Shed Fest party, and we're pretty excited about it. Should be fun. I've just got so much going on right now that I'm having a really hard time. It's literally just week to week, event to event. Last Thursday night, Dallas and I presented. It was really fun to do a presentation to talk about what we do with our group hunts and how we organize and coordinate them. We did that presentation last Thursday night, and I've got that recorded, as well as Steve Shirk's presentation that he did on patterning mature bucks and his trail camera data that he's been collecting over the last couple of years. So I got Steve's presentation and our presentation recorded, and they're up on video, but it was kind of shoddy, the video, and I just don't have good equipment for doing that in person, but I did record the audio, so I'll be posting those up in the next couple weeks. 2 separate podcasts, one of Steve's and then one of ours. And, things are happening. It's been a beautiful week here in upstate New York and across the country, it sounds like, but I know our weather here has been outstanding for the last 7 days. And, Dallas and I have been working in the woods, trying to get the timber out that we have cut all winter. Made a mess of some trails. Things are still muddy, but that's what it's all about. So it's there's no shortage of things to do, and I appreciate everybody's following along and the kicking I'm getting in the pants saying, hey, where's the content? Been looking at your page, refreshing, and there's no new podcast. So here's one for you, and do me a favor, and if you like the conversation, share it, tell somebody about it. Let's help this thing keep growing slowly but surely. And thank you, Big Willy, for stepping up to help out and put some content together. It's much appreciated, and it's fun to get stuff out with a little bit different of a flavor too. So I think that's all I got for today, everybody. If you have any questions on Shedfest, please let me know, and we hope to see you next Sunday. Keep feeding them.
Hey everybody, it's Big Willy, on with my second episode. Welcome to the podcast this week. So I'm up at camp, and we got a fire going, and it's like 20-some degrees out on the day before Easter. I'm with Cal Hasler, Hasler Habitat Solutions, and Cal agreed to come up, and we wanted to do a podcast and have a little chat, and he came up with a great idea. He said, why don't I come to your place, and we can take a look at the property, and then offer some suggestions and get a flavor for what they do with Hasler Habitat Solutions. So Cal, why don't you introduce yourself, and thank you for joining me this morning.
Hey Bill, thanks for inviting me out here. Beautiful spot down here in Naples in the Finger Lakes area. Cool to come back down to this spot. I'm Cal Hasler. Just started doing Hasler Habitat Solutions for a little while now. It kind of started out as like a family friends thing for a little while, and slowly evolved it into like a little small business for myself, I guess. And the whole crux of it is, I guess, wanted something to do with my growing kids, really, something nice to educate them as they grow and be able to provide a service to some people with all this random knowledge I kind of have in my head over these years.
How'd you acquire all that knowledge?
Just years of just roaming the woods, really, and hunting. Started out growing up hunting with my dad. I'd go out in the woods with him before I was even able to hunt. Back in the day of
tagging along, right?
Deer drives, right? Deer drives were real big back then, and just walk around with a stick, make some noise, try to push the deer around a little bit.
That's what us farm boys did.
Yeah.
They tell us to get in the thicket.
That's right.
Run through there, make some noise, kick the deer out.
You're a short little kid, just go through the thickest stuff you can and see what happens. And as the years went on, I really started getting involved with the archery. Really enjoyed spending quiet time in the woods. And just as the years progressed, just try to learn the lay of the land, the way the animals kind of move through the landscape. Try to be a little more in tune with what their needs are, the time of year, the different pressures of the area that you're in, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now, did you grow up hunting something more than just whitetails, or you've always been primarily a whitetail hunter?
Yeah. So it's always been deer. That's for the most part. Did a little bit of turkey hunting when I was younger in college. My buddy from Pennsylvania, he was real good at calling turkeys. And he's like, we got to get you a turkey, I was like, all right, let's try it. And we were out there for 10 minutes, called me in a turkey, and the rest was history. Yeah, I got one. And that's about one of the only 2 times I've turkey hunted. But deer's big. And then when I got a little bit older, my dad went on an elk hunt, and then eventually kind of got into that. Did some guided hunts with that, did some over-the-counter stuff, some solo hunting.
So you've been out numerous times, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been out elk hunting probably about 8 times now.
Good for you.
And that's my second passion. But being in New York, upstate New York, beautiful whitetail country, very diverse habitat that we've got here between agriculture and the natural habitat. We've got some great opportunities.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome area. And I know the one elk you got, I was talking to Ben Williams the other day. We were down in Wellsville at the NBA event, and I asked him, I said, was it you that scored that elk for Cal? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, what'd you get? He goes, well, I'm not that was my first time I ever scored an elk, but he said, I think I was around 3 1/4 or something.
You
it
said
was over 300, wasn't it?
357 and an eighth or something like that? Yeah.
That's it. I can remember you driving out that day. We're at Windy Brew, and I watched you drive out with your truck, a pickup like mine, a crew cab Chevy pickup, and the back was just horns.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
My God.
That was a fun trip home from Montana for sure.
I bet it was. Everybody honking.
Oh man, my dad joked. He's like, "We might have to cut those antlers to get them in that truck." I said, we'll strap it to the roof before we do that."
Yeah. My brother and I just went, and we last year in September, and we took my truck, and that was one of my. It was like between all the meat and all the gear, and I'm like, if we get a nice bull, or even wouldn't take much of a bull to not fit in my cap, right? With all the gear. And he's like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
100%.
We'll tie it on the roof if we have to.
Exactly.
So yeah, good for you. That was a hell of a bull.
Yeah, it was great times. I'll never forget that. That's probably the last elk hunt I'll ever do with my dad, and it was great memories.
Just because he's at a point where he can't do it anymore? Or?
Yeah, he's older now, and it's a little more harder for him to get around.
Great memory,
so
then.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for the both of you.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, another special part about that. So my dad's a veteran, and we were there in November, and the animal density was low out in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. Mm-hmm. It's vast wilderness, and on Veterans Day, he ended up killing a mule deer. For himself, and that was a fun memory too.
Almost like it was meant to be.
It was like it was meant to be. Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
Good for him. So, you're a teacher.
Yep.
By trade,
That's
your
me.
Full-time gig, right?
Yep.
So what do you teach?
So I'm a tech teacher, really. For the older generation, I'm an industrial arts teacher, if you want to call it that. Work with middle schoolers, high schoolers, building projects, learning life skills, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You don't have anybody lopping any fingers off or anything, I hope.
Haven't yet, no. No.
We used to have a lot of fun in our wood shop class. We had this one teacher, Mr. Brown, and he always it was very evident that he was wearing a piece. It was a hair piece, a toupee, whatever you call it. And of course, being dumbass high school kids. There's one kid, Jimmy Bryson. He's like, he had how they have a hose. I don't know if you still have them, but there was a hose that hooked to a central vac system, and you would suck up the wood chips and whatnot into sawdust.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Bryson ran that right up his back and right up to
his
head, and sucked his hairpiece right
Oh,
jeez.
Blew it
out in the dumpster. Yeah, we had, and then just because I was laughing, I got rolled into it, but we had to go out and crawl in the dumpster and dig out his hairpiece and clean it up.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I don't think he ever forgave us for that.
That might be me someday. Is the rate that I'm losing hair right
don't
now?
Ever get a
Oh
hairpiece.
man,
just deal with the baldness.
I'll just shave it off.
There you go. So how long have you been doing that? The teaching?
This is my 5th year. I've been teaching. It's been a weird journey getting there. I started out after high school, small school. Ended up going to Finger Lakes Community College. It's probably there the same time.
Jimmy was there.
Jimmy was there, possibly.
Was there for a semester.
Yeah. Went there for criminal justice originally.
So did Jimmy. Yeah.
Thought I wanted to be a Rochester police officer, and did the whole test thing for that, and ended up switching jobs. Ended up being a satellite technician for like 10 years. Used to work out here in Naples all the time.
Oh,
Naples, Springwater, Middlesex. Out in East Jesus.
Yeah.
That was my territory.
Yeah.
But it was fun. You got to meet new people every day. Yeah. Different situation, and then the teaching thing arose, and did another pivot, and
good for you.
Here I am. And no, it's fun though. It works out good because my wife's a teacher, and we've got two small boys. So
she teach at the same district?
No, different district.
Okay.
Same county, different district.
Yeah.
But it works out good. We're both off in the summer. We can
your
spend
schedules align, and when you have
quality time with the
hopefully you have
kids.
like your breaks are the same weeks and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
awesome.
it's all about kind of quality of life at this point, really, is
Yeah.
with the growing kids.
So how'd you come about kicking off Hasler? So like last year we were hunting some state land. At the end of the hunt, you're like, "Here, everybody, give me a call if I can help you." And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Okay."
yeah.
So how'd you come to that? How'd that
So,
arise?
really, the crux of it is sitting in the deer stand. I have a really hard time sitting in the tree stand nowadays since going out west and hunting elk, which is
Changes you, doesn't it?
primarily that's on the ground, moving all day long, and then you come back to New York and you kind of plop in a tree for half a day or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Go back, get lunch, go back out, pop
yeah,
the tree again.
yeah. So my mind wanders, and I'm always thinking like, where are the deer coming from? Where are they going? What is driving them to make these moves that they're doing within the habitat that they have? Because with elk hunting, the big thing is food, water, sanctuary, right? That's an elk's life. And it's the same thing for a white-tailed deer. They're in the same family. So their needs have to be met. They've got to eat so many times a day. They've got to drink so much. They need to have some shelter. They want sanctuary. And then depending on the time of the year, they want to procreate, right?
Very basic elementary needs.
Teenage boy, essentially.
I think when you go out west and hunt, you kind of, like, I don't know if it, especially, like, I don't know, you hunted Utah, depends on where you're hunting, but, I haven't done a lot of it, but I've a lot of podcasts listening, and Billy and his friends talking about it, and it's, I think it does drive home the point of those basic needs, like the, mule deer move up into the higher country, and they're getting the shade, and they bed all day, right, so they need their cover, and then they come out to eat. And the water, going to water and stuff. So you're right, yeah. It's you really break it down, that's what they need to do. They need food, shelter, water,
Yep.
and procreation.
Yep. So, thinking about that, you've got all this time to think about it in the tree and how everything lays out. And for the longest time, I've been thinking, like, what can I do with these skills that I've acquired over these years to try to help other people, right? Because since COVID, and, during that time, a lot of people got in the outdoors, right? A lot of people bought hunting licenses. There was a lot of, archery hunting has become very, very popular now. So there's more people that are landowners, right? There's more new hunters out there that haven't necessarily grown up with the same type of things that I have and have learned over all these years. So, the natural teacher in me is, if I can pass this information along to people, whether it be just have a simple conversation with them, look at their property, or come up with a detailed map of a plan that they can follow,
Right.
Create a schedule of, do this at this time, this at this time, and build it out over the years, right? It's an investment, right? So I think a lot of people, that if you watch the hunting shows nowadays or whatever, a lot of it is, gimmick oriented for some things, your scent stuff, your latest and greatest gear, whatever it is.
Right.
But when it all boils down to it, it's how you can move through the landscape that the animals are in, right? And knowing the habitat in which they live in and how they move through it, and meeting the needs that need to be met at a certain time, and you compile all that together, that equals a certain level of success.
And not disrupting them too much as you move through the property, right? Because
That's number one.
and that's what, we were listening, or actually did a podcast presentation Billy and Dallas did down in Wellsville, but Steve Shirk was there as well, and he presented a very interesting study he's been doing on deer movement, buck movement, and it's a direct correlation to temperature, like increases in movements, and how he feels that temperature is one of the number one factors, right? But people always ask, what about hunter presence or pressure? But he said pressure trumps all, right? And that's what I've noticed is a lot of guys that do like what you do, they're looking at where your property is, where the deer are, where you want to hunt them, how do you get there, how do you get out, right? And I told you earlier before we started, we were talking about our place here. We got a gorgeous place up on the side of the mountain.
Yep.
The only problem is it's a gorgeous place up on the side of the mountain, right?
Yep.
Because like we come in here and we're right smack dab. I mean, the deer walk right through here, you know, all week when we're not here. But then all of a sudden the pickups are showing up and lights are on, and
Yeah.
so
It's tough.
you know, we're bringing life right into the area. So that's the type of thing that, like, I leased the property down the road here a bit. Gorgeous piece of property, but there was the homeowner, the property owner, and his wife had a house right in the middle of it, like higher up probably, or maybe probably higher elevation than what I'm at here. But I mean, right in the best area for bedding, daytime bedding, and everything.
Yep.
And then everything, you know, you'd see deer moving, all of a sudden they come out of the house and they're like firing up the tractor and you're gonna cut wood or do, you know, living life, right?
Yeah.
But it's so that really drove it home to me. And then you come back here and you think about this. I'm like, I'm not as like much in the core area, but I have the same type of scenario here.
Yeah.
You know, like ideally camp would be down at the base,
Right.
and like we'd be sneaking in and out, and we could have, you know, vegetation planted or managed in a way to provide
Screening.
right?
Yep.
So, have you you've been out doing many jobs, or you know,
Yeah.
how do you go about getting a client, and then what do you do once you get them?
So, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a marketing expert or anything like that. I'm definitely not really a social media guy. It ebbs and flows with my
You got nice hats.
with my motivation. Yeah, the hats are cool,
Hats
right?
are awesome.
I'm a hat guy, so you got to have your own hat, right? You know you've made it when you got your own
That's
hat.
right.
No, maybe not.
That's probably why I started the business.
Just so I can make a cool hat. Exactly. So I guess really word of mouth, really, for the most part. Just trying to build that out. Just referrals, stuff like that. Typical business cards. I've got a website, Hasler Habitat Solutions.com. You can also go to webhhs.com too and find me, or my Instagram, Hasler Habitat Solutions on Instagram. But really, what it comes down to is the first thing I want to do is, if you go to the website, there's an intake form that you can fill out where you can give me all your basic information of the property, how many acres it is, how long you've been hunting there, how many people hunt there, your style of hunting that you prefer, times of day that you usually hunt, times of season that you usually hunt, your preferred weapon. And then from there, once I get that information, you know, with this day and age of satellite technology and 3D models and stuff like that, I can do a pretty good view of being able to look at the lay of your land based on the topography, based on natural features, access, where other houses are, stuff like that. And a lot of that, like the skill that I've acquired through being able to do that, has come through e-scouting of looking at places to go hunting out west. Because I mean, I don't have the luxury of pre-scouting Utah 1,600 miles away.
Yeah.
So
How do you
everything's
get boots on the ground there, right?
everything's got to be done on the computer ahead of time. And so over the years of doing this over and over again, and I'm also a big public land hunter guy. I love hunting Letchworth State Park. So same thing, map stuff.
There's not many deer there, though. I mean,
No, very limited. I would.
but it's pretty.
I would not hunt there ever. A lot of map work has been done there, and then of course with Onyx Maps, as you're walking around, you can keep track of all this information. So you acquire this database of little bits of data sets. But really for me, meeting with a client is get as much information from them as possible, have a sit-down conversation first, and then hear everything from them as far as where their spots are, how they're accessing it, trail cam footage, because from trail cam footage, you can learn a lot, right? If you've done any sort of trail cameras and stuff like that, and you save your photos, you label, if you catalog them, right, and you categorize everything, you can develop a pretty good pattern, right? If you're putting them in the right places, at the right times, at the right angles, so on and so forth.
Right, there's a lot of variables.
A lot of variables.
It's like, you know, Steve Shirk, to go back to what he was saying, he's big into the trail. This is where he gathered his data. But he mentioned, I bring this up because he mentioned he was running, like, last year not this past year, but the year before was like 150 cameras.
It's crazy.
And this year he ran 170.
Yeah.
And I sent him a message afterward and told him, you know, great job with your presentation. I enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to meet you, or whatever. But I also said, you know, I admire you because I run like 6 to 10 cameras, and every year I lose one. I can't remember where I put it.
Yeah.
Like never to be seen again. You know, I mean, like I got camera. I don't know where they went.
Hit it well.
But they he has it down, and I think Billy and Jimmy set us up here at camp with a Cuddy Link system. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
And it's awesome. So we have one that works as like a home base, and it sends out via cell signal or email, or however. But so it's sending us pictures via email, and we got like 7 cameras on the property, and it's really interesting to be able to monitor the deer movement, peaks and valleys in that movement. You know, and when your big bucks appear, you know, and then disappear again. And so it's, the intelligence, if you take the time to really gather it all, and the Cuddy Link is the best way for us, because you don't have to go get a card and then bring it to your computer and put it in, at least for me anyway. I have them all cataloged on my computer. So.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you can see that same deer go from camera to camera to camera.
The direction of travel,
right?
the time,
the temperature.
I told you about our food plots, like in our discussion here, I mentioned that we have like the plots. There's like soon to be 5. We get this one done, but they string across the property. Most of them the next bench up from where we are now.
Yep.
But you'll see one like a buck in the bull meadow, and then you'll catch them in the family stand food plot, and then you'll catch them in the cabin plot. So we've seen that where the movement, and then coming back through 4 hours later, going the other way. So you're like, okay, he was bedded over there, and he's going back there to bed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So for you here, with being in the hills, I mean, topography's huge, right? A deer is an animal of efficiency, right? They want to take the path of least resistance, just like a human, essentially.
Sure.
So what topography goes, they're not going to go straight up and straight down unless it's kind of like trying to evade something.
Right.
Or
It's an escape.
Yeah, an escape for the most part. So for you to be able to string in topography and certain terrain features with one another and the supplemental food within this area, right? Because essentially, big wood style, for the most part, you're in kind of a food desert, essentially, for the deer, right? Because their life is lived from 5 feet and down for the most part. So once you start getting a large canopy of trees out there, you know, it shades out the ground. You can't get that new growth, that new regeneration, stuff like that. The food disappears. So, yeah, I could see where supplemental food here is big alongside of the topography, and then again the access and time of which you're trying to go someplace. Because with it being as hilly as it is, thermals are a big consideration as far as not only wind direction, but your thermals based on morning, afternoon, stuff like that goes.
The thermals, it's interesting, the winds here, because, you know, you listen, you know, you watch social media, you listen to podcasts, watch the hunting shows, whatever, and it's like, okay, there's a little funnel here, and the deer bed here, and they're like the feet over there, and they're going to come through here, and your wind is out of this direction. My brother and I always joked that, like, I can sit in my tree stand, and the wind's out of every single direction at some time over the course of 2 hours. It's like, and I think it's a mixture of the thermals and the way the air, like did you look over our property on like Onyx or something, a topo map for you? So you know that like this, locals call this like the muskmelon, right? Because it's just like this hill. It's like, and it's round. Like we could go right around this hill.
Yeah.
It's like more oval. But the point is, like you go up here, and then if we went right and stayed at main elevation, we would wrap around what we call the point, and then you go back in the valley, then you back in the far end, you'd wrap back around, you come right back here. It's a big circle, right? But I think depending on what direction the wind's blowing and how the thermal, like the sun hits this side first, and doesn't hit the back. Like I've had stands on the backside on a kind of a north facing or northwest facing slope, and the sun doesn't come up till, you know, on opening day. I've been there, and it's like the sun's shining on the other hill, everything's beautiful. I'm in the dark, it's cold. So the thermals do weird things.
Thermals are dropping, everything's dropping down to the bottom.
Which works to my advantage sometimes. I mean, I smell the buck up over there. I'm in my stand, I'm like, I smell it. And I did. It was a buck there. And I shot several times at him and didn't get him. But my brother wrapped that deal. But it was a hell of a nice buck. But and I think that plays into how we hunt the side hills. Like putting a stand on the side hill, or do you try and hunt below
Yeah, all depends on what their main travel corridor is, or are you targeting that main corridor, or are you trying to get off to it and get that side trail, right? It all depends on what your buck movement is like, because generally the bucks aren't going to move the same route that all the rest of the population of deer move through.
Like you see all the does running. There's always a secondary trail or travel route.
Yep.
Like you can find the main area, and then 20 yards over there's a buck rub line if you look close.
Yep.
And I think that the hills, like we've always found, my brother and I hunting up here, that a lot of time the bedding is just over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll, like when we're still hunting, we'll work the edges, maybe like you would do out west where you're glassing an area, but we'll get to the brink or the break of the hill, if you will, and then take a knee and just glass down below. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we find our bucks laying there.
Yep.
Looking downhill,
Yeah.
So they do, and Billy, I've learned that some from Billy and Steve Shirknall's. Like the whitetails, typically they like the elevation, especially the bucks. They like to bed on the upper third, maybe, of the hill.
Yeah.
And I've seen that.
Get that vantage.
Yeah, and usually not on the flat. They usually bet over the edge. You don't usually see the bucks bedded up in the flat, if you will, even though it's a little bit uneven terrain and rising up, rising down. It's kind of the level. But I think it gives them great escape options.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if need be, they can jump up and they're down the hill. I mean, it's just like effortless.
A couple bounds and they're gone. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also have noticed that, like when I'm hunting that area, I've noticed where they get up and they don't go down. They stay at that elevation and head south or whatever. And it's like they're going to another spot. And if they had to, they'd probably go down. But if you're doing a nice slow still hunt and they see you or catch your wind or whatever, they get up and just slink out of there.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times they're not going to go far. They're going to go just far enough out of sight where they can watch you.
Yes.
Because deer are naturally curious. So they're going to want to see what it
Everything
is.
out here is trying to kill them.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, but there is instances where, they get that whiff and then that's it. Game over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned you brought a drone. So you have a drone that you fly over the properties, which is that's it's really cool, but it's also what a great effective way to get that other
higher perspective.
You can do e-scouting and look at Google Earth.
It's only so good.
It's only so good.
Yeah.
So the detail you pick up with a flyover with a drone. I know we did that at work at school. Like when we got done with projects, we'd have people that had drones that community members or whatever, and they'd do flyovers for us. As a matter of fact, my nephew did one and flew the campus after a big project, and that's still on the webpage today. I think.
Yeah.
But wow, what a perspective it provides. So that's a great tool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really lets you see like a true lay of the land, right? It gives you that high enough perspective to where you can kind of see everything, see the different levels of topography, and also depending on the terrain features, you can see how each one plays into the next one, to where you can kind of narrow down where those major areas of movement are going to be kind of concentrated.
As you look at the terraces or something,
Yep.
like the hillside here, I described you. We have, this isn't a flat bench, but it's as much of a bench as you're going to get up here. But we got three benches here, and then we go right up the hill. So
Yep.
that would allow you to see maybe how those benches and travel corridors interact.
Yep, you can see all that. Then you can also see major edges, right? A soft edge, a hard edge, major disturbances in the forest or whatever it might be. Because you got to remember, a deer is basically, they're an edge animal. They love edges, right? They want to be on a real thick edge or some sort of, hardwoods to pines or something like that, or tall grass to the wood block or something like that. And back in the day when we used to have hedgerows, right?
Yeah.
It's a definitive space for them to, one, get protection, but two, a rather easy place to travel, and also those areas usually end up turning into like a signpost essentially for a communication hub for all the other deer. So if you can establish those different features and anomalies within the terrain, it gives you a cool perspective for that too.
Yeah, experience tells. me that as well, right? That, I mean, you can go into the wide open wood and sit down in the middle of it, and yeah, I mean, something could stumble along.
Yeah.
But you're going to be better off if you're hanging on an edge or observing an edge. And that's, you see that in Pennsylvania when we hunted some down there. It's like where these clear cuts are. I mean, it's like I wouldn't even try and go in there. It's that thin. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's a hard edge, right?
Yeah.
On the outside edge, but a lot of times there's that riparian zone in between where it'll taper from that hard edge to the.
Yep. That's where your diversity happens.
That's where your diversity, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's the same thing in the elk woods, right? A lot of people key in on, burn areas, right? A major disturbance went through there, right? That creates new regeneration, new younger growth. That's where the nutrients, the minerals, are all concentrated in that fresh growth. And the animals know that. They seek that out.
Right.
So that's where they're going to kind of get drawn to.
That's where the e-scouting comes in.
Yeah.
And I know we do that in PA. We're always looking at clear cuts, and Dallas had showed us where, like, you can go on the maps and it will give you a year that cut was done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, if it was last year, you can probably get through there a little bit, and there might be some bedding in there or whatever, but if it's 4 years old or 5 years old, you're probably not going to walk through it.
No.
If it's 8 or 10 years, so it's, and I saw that in my first trip down there. I saw these cuts at different stages, and it was really amazing.
Yeah.
The difference. But they were all an edge of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was a 10-year-old cut, it still had different age growth. In the plant life there,
Yep.
the diversity was different than the big woods. So they do a nice job in PA. And I think down at Hightor, I don't know if you noticed, but you did a run down there today, right?
Yeah.
So you probably noticed some areas that were cut.
Yeah, they were doing a
they've
little
been doing
logging.
some cutting down there.
Yep.
And I think that was we did a hunt there this year, hunted that area, a day hunt, and with my son and my brother and his son, and it was amazing. Like, you go through the woods, you might cut a track or something, but when you got near those cuts or below a cut, like some of those cuts that were higher, but around those cuts is where the deer were, and sometimes in them.
Yep.
But yeah, as we neared those, you had to, like, heads up, we're getting in that, that type of terrain. So
Yeah,
it's a cool
absolutely.
area.
Yep.
So you're thinking that perhaps we go out and do a walk around here, or take a ride on the ATVs, and
Yeah.
take a look at the property and the lay of the land, and then maybe reconvene here and do like the second half or something, right?
Sounds-
Kind of talk a little bit about what you've seen and what we're doing, and maybe what suggestions you might have.
Yeah, I mean, from the looks of it and what you've told me, you guys have put a lot of work in here so far. But it all comes in stages, right? You can't do everything all at once.
Yeah, so
And-
it's a life's work here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm excited. I want to see what you got here. I mean, I've been down in this area a lot, and it's kind of fun to see, like, hill country as opposed to, like, ag country, because the styles of hunting are completely different.
Very different.
Very different.
The only thing the same is our prey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a whitetail's a whitetail,
Yeah.
but boy, it's a different ballgame.
They're a different animal when you get into this sort of terrain, for sure.
I brought my, years and years ago, I brought my wife's brother up to hunt. I'm like, yeah, come up to camp, do a deer hunt with us, So he came and hunted with us for the day. And when he left that night, we were like packing up and we're leaving camp, and he's like, thanks so much for having me. He goes, this was unbelievable. And he goes, there's one thing I can tell you for sure. I go, what's that? He goes, I will never step foot on this godforsaken place again. He goes, you guys are out of your mind. He's like, there's easier ways to get deer.
Yeah.
Because he was really born and raised farmland,
Mhm.
flatlander. But,
Yeah.
so this isn't for everybody.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he loves deer hunting. I love deer hunting, but he has no desire to come up here and hunt the way we hunt.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about hunting, is there's so many different ways you can do it. You can sit in a box
You
blind.
can sit all day long in a box blind if you want, or
You can put a heater and a TV in there you want, or you can just sit in a tree saddle all day,
Yeah.
whatever your style may be.
I did them both this past season. I got a nice stump 4 blind. I got a stump 2 banks blind. But you can watch the Sunday football in there.
Yeah.
And it's quiet, and you're out of the weather. And I had some great hunts. I saw a great deer. But there's something about taking the suck out of the hunt. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you go out
Yeah.
and bust your ass,
Yeah.
and you're wet and cold, and you went 8 or 10 miles or 7 miles on a hunt, and saw different land the whole time. You're not
Yes.
sitting there staring at the same
Yeah.
food plot. That really, I love that part of it too. I'm the more that piece where you're getting out and still hunting. Still hunting is definitely my best. And by still hunting, I don't know, different terms, I guess, but for us, it's, my father taught us early on, a few steps, stop, stand here, look around.
Yep.
Just easy movement.
Just
through
move with the landscape real slow.
And when we do an organized still hunt, that's when things happen.
Yes.
Like we'll all spread out a couple 100 yards apart and just like go easy through an area. And, so it's fun. But yeah, let's. How about we take a break and we go out and check out the property, and then we'll reconvene and wrap up part 2.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go for a ride. Thanks, Cal.
Yep.
We'll be back, folks.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Cal and I are out. I ran back and got the recorder because we were having some great conversations. I'm like, this is what we ought to be recording. So I ran back down and got it. You missed the section where Cal was asking, if we ever basically, felled trees in a fashion in which we could direct deer in a certain path up here. And we actually haven't. So we talked a little bit about that and some trails, right? Like maybe in a real thick spot, cutting easier path for them.
Yep.
So we had a great conversation on that. Sorry you missed it, but we can recap later. But so I went down and got the recorder, and now we're back up, and we are in the what we call the family stand food plot. And so while I was gone, Cal said I have some comments here, so take it away.
So I guess I'm just trying to get an idea of what you're trying to accomplish in this spot here, of what maybe you're trying to get to grow here, and what your intentions are with this spot, I guess.
All right, so this spot, we're kind of using, it's not big enough. I think it's about a half an acre, and it's irregular shaped. It's got a little bit of slope to it, right? So what we've done is we've had some clover in here last year, and I just frost seeded this a little bit ago. But really creating a food source, but also if you remember where we were down below by the cabin, I showed you where the travel corridor was to that thicket. The deer, this is like where they'll first pop up, and then they start working their way across the property.
Okay.
And so this is kind of like maybe a destination. It's not the destination food plot, but it's like a plot along the way.
Mm-hmm. Staging.
And this is what we get here is early afternoon deer in here. And I think that obviously one of the things that we have a little concern with is the cabin being right there. That like if you have guys at the cabin, that's going to impact the utilization of this plot.
Potentially, yeah. Yep. Depends on the time of day,
Yep.
wind direction, all that kind of stuff. Now I see there's a natural scrape right at the edge there on that vine. Now I'm assuming
there's an apple tree at the other end.
Saw that.
And they scraped the heck out of that apple tree.
Yep. Now have you gone through and tried to trim that out to kind of spur on some new growth out of the tree?
Yeah, I've pruned that a couple times over the years. Probably 2018 or 19 was the last time I cut that. And, due to we had 0 apples up here last year, as did a lot of folks. And I think it was due, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had a really late frost where they may have been in bloom and then it frosted. So we had no apples, but that tree, it's like, I don't know enough about pruning apple trees. I need to learn more. I know the sucker shoots that go straight up, you want to cut them off. I also know you want to do it when the tree's very dormant, like in January. So that's why I haven't, now I have time, but I'm not going to do it because it's the wrong time of year.
Yes.
And you'll see some other apple trees I'm going to show you on the property that we've tried to bring back. And we just freed up some apple trees down at the other side of the property. I'll show you that spot. But we're expanding a food plot. And in doing that, we brought it right up to those apple trees and cut down, because I think they've been, when the apple trees start growing straight up, it's because they're going for sunlight, right?
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yep.
So
getting shaded out.
Yeah, they were getting shaded out, and you want that tree to have the, what do you call it, crown on it?
Yep. Yeah, with an apple tree, you're going to get your fruit growth on the horizontal branches. So you can tame a tree over time. With a real young tree, you can put weights on the end of the limbs to get them to bend them down, to get them to grow out horizontally. Okay. Definitely prune them and stuff like that, release them, get all the stuff that's growing around them, get that out of there. let that bloom out a little bit more for sure.
When this tree yields apples, it's really,
good.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's a
'Cause I've
major
seen
draw.
bucks walk right across this food plot, like when we're hunting up in here, and watch them walk right across the food plot, go right to there, eat apples. You got, they're making scrapes.
Yep.
We talked, Jimmy and I talked in depth about like how to set up here, and we ended up not setting up here because the tree, like everything like that, drops off on this side of the food plot. So, you get elevated, they're going to be looking right at you, and they're all pole trees. There's no there's like, if there was a couple nice, pines in there that we could get into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing, controversial subject of hinge cutting and stuff like that to create some horizontal cover, drop those around the edge, and then you could also get some stuff to grow in there.
Well, I think if we drop some of this, and you get some successional growth coming in, that would break you up a little bit. The other thing that Jimmy's wanting to do, and I'd be interested to hear your take on it, but we're talking about planting sunflowers like on that half.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels that like if they do well, if they don't get eaten out young and they're able to mature, that would provide a nice bit of a screen.
Yep, that would work.
For the camp.
You could do that. You could try some Egyptian wheat, something that grows up a little bit.
Does
taller,
that have a food value or more
thick.
of a screen value? The Egyptian
more of a
wheat?
screen value. Yeah.
So we have such little food, other than natural browse, which I think we have pretty good natural browse, and you'll see going through the property that there's, because of the clear cuts and the logging we've done, it's relatively thick. It's the thickest piece around. The properties on each side of us are not as densely populated, doesn't have the stem density that we have here. That being said, we're trying to augment the food here, and it really does. The does, basically, my take on it would be that we have does that settle in here. This is their residence, and they raise their fawn. Like, I know these deer. I watch them all summer long, right?
Yeah.
And I can take you to a spot up there where she usually, like, they'll birth fawns every year, and then they'll bring them down. Then they'll be coming back and forth, and then pretty soon you don't see them up there because they're staying down here. But you don't see the bucks down here.
Yeah.
Not until October.
Right.
You start getting in the fall, the bucks will all move in here. So,
well,
we didn't like here. That's why I showed you the stand way up high. As a matter of fact, you can see it. Like, you got a direct shot to it there. You're not gonna, like, we don't have any place where you can archery hunt this plot.
Yep. Now,
so we try and catch them at the next plot or up there, and they do come in and out up here quite a bit.
have you done any sort of spraying in here to kind of kill off the
grasses,
the vegetation that's grown up here?
No, we've tried to control it mostly with mowing.
Mowing, yeah. And I mean, I guess, if you get clover established well enough, it'll shade out the grass and overtake it.
We had real good clover in that plot, and a lot of it depends. You look at this. I frost seeded this, and I was thinking to myself, I probably should have scratched some of these leaves off here first, because if that seed's not getting soil, if it's laying on top of these leaves, I'm not getting soil contact. I'm wasting my money.
Yep, 100%.
Seed's expensive,
Yeah.
But even if if I ran over it with a York rake.
Yeah, you got a York rake down there. That'd be perfect.
Right, and just to I think I'd get better seed contact. So that's one of the things that I noticed after I did it, because I'm walking along with my spreader and I'm hearing the seeds landing on the leaves. I'm like, well, that's a waste.
Yep. Now I see there's you got a natural scrape over there with that grapevine on that green briar.
Yeah.
Now your intentions with this were to create a mock scrape of sorts with that, or a licking branch?
Yeah, we actually put that in 2 years ago and never replaced the stick last year, but you see that scrape that's under it?
Yeah.
That's a real scrape that the deer put there this year.
Okay.
So they actually did, we didn't, the first year we had a mock scrape there, and then we didn't do anything with it last year, and we just never got around to, folks, just so you know what we're talking about, I've got a mechanical rig that sticks in the ground, and you can put cut a green sapling with an overhanging limb and stick it into the spring and clamp it down, and basically putting a tree in the food plot. I'll tell you, we put those out and we immediately had activity and pictures there. And
well, it's a new feature. They're curious to see what it
exactly.
is. In a spot that is completely barren, to have a random new tree just sticking there
in the middle of it.
They got to figure out what it is, and you get a couple people putting their nose and their eyeball up to it and rubbing their forehead on it, and then next thing you know, everybody in town's got to check it out. The one thing is you've got to stand up there, and obviously you're trying to target some movement within this area. One thing I would try to do is, if you are setting up on a spot where there's a scrape, is make sure that the scrape that you're hunting over or in close proximity to is the only one around. So if you're setting up on a spot with a scrape or anything like that, terminate all the other ones in the area and try to concentrate.
How would you terminate that?
Cut them like
overhanging
that one
limb?
right there. If you don't want them scraping on that, I'd cut that whole thing out, get rid of all that grapevine.
So what we're looking at is a grapevine and the hanging out of them bushes, but I mean cut that back.
Yep.
To take, because they want the overhanging limb, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying to terminate a scrape, take away some of those desirable features of a scrape.
Yep.
Okay.
And then to enhance a spot, rather than just having just a tree with a stick, is if you can take one of these grapevines here and tie it up, zip tie it, something like that, to where it'll hang down and dangle, right? That grapevine will hold and carry the scent a lot better than just like a regular stick will. And plus, it kind of waves around. They got to rub their face on it. Yeah.
We had a spot where there was naturally a vine hanging like that down in here, and Billy hunted over it, and that was a hot spot with that grapevine that hung down. The end of it hung down, and it would swing. And the deer, boy, they like that. That be able to swing that vine around. And eventually, I think the tree that vine was in came down and it ruined the whole spot. You know? But we should try hanging another vine there.
Yep. And if
to
you
try and recreate that.
If you do find a vine that is in a scrape spot, you can actually cut it out of there and move it to where you want it to be.
Oh, okay.
Just make sure you don't touch it with your hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Try to hold it up high and then tie it in the tree. You're bringing that natural scent with you there.
Great thought. Yeah.
I wouldn't do anything artificial. I try to stay away from all
like
that.
ropes and stuff.
Yeah, it's not natural, and there's no reason to soak it. And
we have so much vine. We have so many vines here, and the deer, you get the vine at the right height, hanging in the right spot, and they just seem to love it. You know?
They have to touch it. They have to see what it is and who else has been there for sure.
What next?
Well, I guess let's just keep working our way around the hill here.
We'll check back in with you folks. We're going to take a break and move locations. Okay, back with you, and Cal was just giving me some advice on the shape of a food plot. So take it away, Cal.
So looking at this here, this is kind of, it's hourglass shape, I want to say, or barbell shape for the most part. So it narrows in the middle a little bit, but either end it kind of bulges out, and it's probably 35 yards at the widest, and then narrows down to what, like 15,
18 yards,
something
at the
like
narrowest.
that. Now you got to imagine, based on the terrain feature here, we're sitting on a bench, right? So we're kind of on a terrain feature that the animals are going to follow. So with the way that the food plot sets up here is, theoretically, if they were to come out at either end here, right? If a buck comes out next to that trail where the four-wheeler is there, he can look and see the other end there and know exactly what's happening over there.
Right. He sees the whole plot.
He sees the whole thing. So there's no reason for him to necessarily walk over there to see if anything's over there, because he can visually see it from one end to the other. Same thing from the other side where the apple tree is, right?
Yeah.
You got to imagine, if deer are going to be funneling out towards that apple tree, that's a magnet right there. If it's producing apples, that's the candy store, right?
Yeah. And even when it's not, it's a scrape location.
It's a scrape location,
Annually,
right? Yeah, it's a signpost. So the deer are naturally going to want to travel to that spot, but you got to think, where are they staging before they get to that spot? Because they're going to hold up, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 yards in there to evaluate the situation before they progress any farther.
Right.
So that's a spot to key into for a stand location, right? Not necessarily at the source, but at a pre-staging source, a staging or holding area before they proceed. But the next thing is every deer that comes out to that tree can see everything on the other side. Where if it's a V shape or a horseshoe shape or a U shape, whatever you want to call it, if they were to come out in a corner, they would have to go around to see what's on the other side, right? So you're getting more time within the area that you want them to be to move through it.
Especially when they're like seeking out, or in that rut time of year.
Gives them more pockets to have to go check out.
Yeah, makes great sense.
Because a buck, during rut time, or pre-rut, right, when they're actually going out and trying to find those early estrus does, they're not necessarily going to be walking on the paths that the deer are on typically. They're going to be downwind of it to scent check that area, because they're going to try to cover as much ground with their nose before they do with their feet. Right?
Because that's quicker, more efficient.
More
for them
efficient, yeah.
Right.
Yep. It just saves
and that's
that
what
energy.
you were telling me down below when we were talking out there, and we didn't have the recorder, but I was telling you about what we call the forgotten stand back behind the cabin. We walked back in and looked at the brush. You said now in the morning the bucks they'll probably work across this ridge to see if they scent check any hot does in here. And I was like, yep, that's exactly what I see. In the morning they run that ridge, and I figured for that reason. But then you mentioned that in the afternoon you're more likely to see them cutting across the top, and I have 2 forgotten stands over there, one down low, one up high. It's called the upper and the lower. I usually, like in the afternoon, you hunt the upper and you see the bucks working across up top, and I'm like, okay, that's where the thermals come in.
Thermals,
right?
yep, 100%.
And now I've seen that, I've observed that. If you asked me, what do you see here, I probably would have told you that. But I never took time to really dig into the why.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you were talking about the thermals, and I was talking about the value of having you here, looking at that, going, this is what I would see happening. And it just confirms it, but it gives the why.
Yep, 100%.
So I think that's the value of having, like, I know this property way better than you do.
Yeah.
Because I spent my entire life here.
Yeah.
However, having you come in, you in your initial glance and assessment has tremendous value.
Yep.
I think that's where, Hasler Habitat Solutions can really help out. And that's why I wanted to do this, because I've never had somebody come in, and go, have you tried this? You think about that? So it's very, now what would you do here? Just to give you the background on this food plot and some of the other ones, we don't have a lot of width, right, of usable space on this bench, if you will. Okay, so I can't get too wide. I could get longer. You'll see that we've got breaks where we go from one to the next. But like in a plot like this, would I have been better off to leave vegetation in there and have 2 small, like take on the barbell, if you look at this as a barbell or a dumbbell, to take the center out and just have one little end of the dumbbell there and one little end of it here, and have the natural vegetation in between?
It gives you more edge if you do it that way, and it gives another pocket for a deer to investigate a spot.
Because that's what I was wondering. It's like, okay, now I've built this. Like, how would I, like, if I wanted to fix that?
Yeah.
Was that what I would do? Is a screen in there, get some vegetation planted in here, some trees?
Yeah, you could do like a midpoint screen right there, something where they'd have to actually go through to the other side to see what's there. But you also got to think, because this is kind of a taller canopy forest here, and there's not a ton of understory, a deer could come out up there and look down into all of this and see everything in here, because you don't have any sort of thick screen edge around it. Right. So they could be so far away and look down in here and see nothing. Now, if it's just a great food source and they're all going to come here anyways, that doesn't really matter per se. But as far as access for you and moving around it and being able to not see out and not see in, there's a huge benefit to that as far as comfort-wise goes for the animal.
And I showed you the stand that's right up above us here. And that's why it stands up there, because the deer tend to move into that thick area up there. And I think they can look down here, and that's where we're killing bucks, is up there.
Yep.
But I'll bet you the bucks are doing what you're saying. They're coming through here. They can look down, especially full leaf off, right, by November 1st or 10th or whatever. They can look down here, see if there's anything here. They don't have to come down here.
No, they don't. And with the sunshine, right, this hillside heats up faster than any other spot. So naturally your thermals are going to go up. So they're going to bed above whatever that source is or whatever they're going to potentially go to eventually. So they're scent checking the whole time, but their head's probably facing a different direction, watching their backside.
Gotcha. For bedding, you mean?
For bedding purposes, yeah. So for this right here, what you could do is you could start chewing in, going uphill
Wrap
there.
it up. There's another little bench you can see up there, and maybe we should horseshoe it around.
Wrap that up there. But almost, I probably maybe wouldn't necessarily like blow it out real big, kind of just make a little meandering little tie-in point to where they could feed into that, to where it eventually will bring them into here, right? You can steer the deer however you want, right? You could drop certain trees in a certain way terminate a pre-existing trail, terminate that, drop a tree on it, and then create a new spot to where once you start getting some traffic on there, the deer are just going to take it over and they'll forget about the other one. So where you can create a path that works in your favor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But eventually it'll just be habitual for them.
That's just the path then.
Yeah, it's just the path,
Yeah.
right? That's where the success kind of comes in, is if you can compound that with good access, low pressure, then you have the food, and then you've got the easy moving corridors from tying all those pieces together.
Yeah, interesting. All right, on to our next spot. Okay, we're back with you, and just took Cal up to one corner of our property. So what we got, Cal, is there's a property pin. You see it right there?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we got a property pin there. What our property does, it runs up onto that ledge. See, there's a little bit of a ledge over here?
Mm-hmm.
And we have a pin up there, and from there it runs on an angle all the way back to the road. So that's a long run. And then this edge right here, that property pin, we come down this way, and then we go right across through here, all the way to the top of the hill. So
Okay.
I wanted to show you this because this is a spot that I like to hunt up in here. We've taken a lot of bucks up in there, right at the base before it goes up.
Right where it gets
and
steep,
my
yeah.
access here a lot of times is right through here. I'll cut through right in here and then angle up the hill. There's an old logging road. You can see runs right up that point,
Yep.
and then that's how I access it.
Okay.
But Jimmy had you can see his stand over here, and we've killed and seen some really big bucks hanging right in through here. We my whole life here, we never hunted like this, never had a stand at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking we were missing something,
Yeah.
because Jimmy's put in here and he's shot some big bucks, and so has Adam, one of our other guys. So I've always killed them up there, but archery kills, we've had some good luck down here. And you can tell we did a cut down here. This is all, we did some clear cut in here and some logging. So it's nice and thick in here.
Yeah, so that elevation change that you just talked about, killing deer at certain spots and maybe not hunting this as much as you could have, it's kind of one of those things where you know as well as anybody else does, is like stand placement's key. Whether it's here or 15 yards over there, that could mean all the difference in the world. Now in your situation, when you're talking hunting hillsides like this, being at one elevation versus another on the hillside, depending on how that topography lays into the rest of the landscape, is even bigger, right? We don't have cornfields and hedgerows and different diversities of habitat to work with here as much as some other places. So that elevation point, that benchmark or that one little saddle spot or whatever it might be, that's your concentrator. So you're talking about,
and that's what you're seeing up here with this little ledge you see right up
Yep.
there. And that ledge is at the base, and then you can look, like I have a stand up there, and I've taken a lot of bucks up there, as has my dad. But you get daytime movement up there.
Mm-hmm. That's a high point. The day's warmed up, the hillside's warmed up. They can move around up there knowing that they can probably smell a majority of the stuff that's at lower elevations than them. And they might already know if they've come over from the top or they've come around a different way, they already know that direction is relatively safe. So their ability to move throughout the day up there, they're a little bit more comfortable. Whereas down here, they know they're getting a little bit closer to the danger zone, being with the cabin right in the middle, stuff like that. Because really, the perfect setup for anybody's property, no matter what the size of it or the shape of it is, you always want to hunt the edges from the very outside of your property, right?
Gotcha.
You never want to go into the middle of your property and start hunting from there, because from there you're just pushing the deer out, and once they're out of your property, then the game's over.
Gotcha.
So if you can hunt from the edges with optimal wind directions, with good access, And if you do bump deer, you move them to the interior of your property and you kind of leave the inside free of invasion. The deer are much more comfortable moving on the interior of your property, and then that way later in the day they'll move from the inside out to whatever the other external food sources are, where hopefully you've got food on the outside, so you're drawing them from the inside out rather from the outside in.
That's another unique piece of our property. If you look at the footprint of the property, and there's a lot of factors that play into it, but basically our food sources are right down the middle.
Yeah.
On a line down the middle, but that's because that's where the bench is, right?
Yep.
If we were in farm country, it might be different. If it was a flatland wood lot, you could do different things with it.
Yep.
So, sometimes you got to, and I guess it would play in when you go to buy a piece. If you're buying property, that's the sort of stuff you want to look at. We bought this property and have learned a lot since, and it was like, God, I wish I had more of a south-facing slope. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. But the bottom line is we got what we got. And it's a beautiful spot, and we've taken good bucks. But there's, like, knowing what I know now, would we do things differently?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that, again, that's the value of having that fresh perspective that you bring to it to share with us. But I just wanted to show you, like, the property edge of the line. And you, from down below, you would talk about possibly kicking that food plot up and around a little bit.
Yeah, if you could do that might make it a little more
interesting. But this is generally our bedding, and during the like the chase phase and during the rut, you'll see and hear the deer crashing around up there on that side hill, and they'll loop down a doe, bring them down on a chase and right back up again. So, but that's a good place to get a buck during the day, but it's also, on the side hill, and that's, maybe roughly halfway up. So, now you're getting right in there with them.
Yeah.
So you got to get in there early and then don't move, stay there. A couple of years ago on opening day, I was up in that stand, and I think it was like 1:30. I ended up shooting. There was 4 bucks and a doe, and they were fighting. You could hear the antlers hitting, but they were in the beech brush up thick. But I ended up not shooting the biggest one, but I shot the one I could shoot because I was literally froze to death, and I was like, I had to get. But I got him, and Billy had the same thing where he had one buck with like 8 or 9 does come across through there, and he shot. He ended up killing that buck, and that was the middle of the day. It was like 1 o'clock. I was up here with my brother, and we were getting firewood that we had from this cut. We had stacked some extra firewood here, so we were grabbing it and bringing it. All of a sudden, you hear a gunshot down at that end of the property, and Billy followed those deer. They popped out, and he was on the logging road, and he followed them, and they just worked their way. They're very content, very comfortable on that side hill. He was above them following, which was good. He had the logging road that played to his favor, too, because the logging road angles down, and that brought the access together where he could get the shot.
Yep.
So what do you think? Head that way on the property, or you want to loop around the point? Probably see how we're doing on time, right?
Yeah. I'm good for time. I don't have to worry about me.
All right.
Or 11 o'clock.
All right. We'll take a break and move locations.
Well, that's right. We always.
So we're back recording. Cal and I are standing here talking with my brother, and we're just kind of hitting on some topics of food plot, which is just like my brother and I have been talking about this for ages. What do you plant? How do you get it to survive? And it was interesting because we were saying we plant, like if you plant a winter feed of brassica, they eat it right to dirt, right? And you were saying it's like, the utilization of another plant, right? Like rye.
Yeah.
And it really boils down to what the food source availability is of other foods and staging it, right?
Yeah, what's going to drive them to your spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And not having a monoculture, really.
The maximum amount of diversity you can is key, I think. Because their palates change, depending on the time of the year.
Yeah.
Their stomachs, as they get closer to winter, their stomachs have to kind of change a little bit to be more used to eating that woodier browse. Yep.
Yeah. So the other thing that was interesting that Cal and I talked about was some of these trees. Like we were just over on the other side of the bowl meadow looking at that cut there, and he's like, the trees that are left here, you hinge cut them and get some in one direction and drop another one across them. And he was talking about the value of that hinge cutting. It was kind of the wrong time of year, though. Didn't you say we should hinge cut it in the winter?
In the winter time, yeah, when all the nutrients are down in the root system, right? As soon as you come in and you hinge cut that, well, the tree is dormant. Once we're into this time of year now where all the nutrients are starting to grow back to starting the development of leaves, new shoots and stuff like that. Once you take that tree and you cut that down, all those nutrients that were in the root system to sustain the canopy of the tree are now going to be super concentrated to an area. So if you're talking like a maple or something like that, those new maple shoots coming out of there is going to be like a dinner bell to the deer, because they know that that is the highest value food in the area, because of all those nutrients that were in the root system are now in all of that fresh growth coming out of that stump there of that tree.
So how long does it take for those shoots to, like, they wouldn't come that spring, would they?
Oh yeah.
Oh, would they? They
Yep.
come that fast?
So all the maples that I cut throughout the winter, they're going to start developing shoots this year, and they'll bush right out.
Yeah.
Every year they'll just keep bushing out more and more and more, and you'll see they'll just keep hitting it over and over and over again.
We had ash, like we cut ash out of the yard of the cabin. Didn't they do the same type of thing? They like bush right out, like in the winter. They were dying anyway, right? I mean, they got the emerald ash borer, right? So Mike was clearing some of them out of the yard of the cabin, and they were same thing. They were just like it was like a bush.
Yep.
Like you planted a bush there. In the summer when I was up mowing, I seen them, you know?
Yeah, well, with an ash tree, so a lot of times you'll see a standing dead ash tree, but a lot of times down towards the bottom,
Yeah.
you'll start getting those shoots come out, even though the whole rest of the tree is dead.
Yeah.
The root system might still be viable, and it's still pushing nutrients up to a certain point to before the beetle got to killing the tree.
Yeah, the cambium layer or whatever they call
Yep,
it.
just that, because, you know, whether you hinge cut a tree, obviously you're hinge cutting a tree to keep some sort of either side cover growth, some sort of food value, but then you could also do what's called girdling a tree, where you just take your chainsaw and cut a little notch around it. Basically, you're just getting to that cambium layer so it doesn't allow nutrients to go to the rest of the tree. So you end up with a standing dead tree, where so if you had like a really gnarly tree that you couldn't cut down safely,
We did that with some.
you could girdle them.
Remember that?
But that leaves a potential future hazard for a tree to come falling down.
Matter of fact, we had one here, didn't we, Mike? Is it that one right there that we girdled? Remember that? No? Or maybe I'm thinking of going down below. There was a couple that were girdled. So, all right. Well, we'll reconnect at the cabin and wrap it up. So we'll talk to you soon. Alrighty, gang. We are back. We're sitting back at the cabin after. I didn't think the intermission would be that long, but I'd say we've been gone 2.5 hours, haven't we?
Yeah, well, it's last time we looked at the watch, it was 11, and now it's 1.
Yeah, we looked at 11 when we're an hour and something.
Yeah.
But I could spend a whole day with you out here. It's very interesting.
It takes time to look through everything and
And we didn't
talk
see it
out.
all, right?
No.
I mean, I tried to give you the quick through, and we, did a couple little ancillary field trips, but for the most part, you kind of got a feel for the lay of the land and what we're doing here. So what's your what would be some takeaways after seeing what we got going here?
So I guess one major thing for me looking at it is there's a lot of old growth in here. You got a really high canopy, not much of an understory, just due to the fact of sunlight not being able to reach the ground. Yeah. And then anything that does grow up, any new sapling or anything that does grow up, it appears that it's instantaneously just being eaten at this point. So you don't anything that's growing doesn't have time to establish. Therefore, the understory is non-existent at this point. So you've got some good.
Now, would you, not to interrupt you, but I just want to clarify. So I go through here in June and I'll be like, oh my God, I've done a beautiful job. Look how thick it is, all the understory I've created. And then to hear you say there's really no understory, I'm like, gee, God, I'm still not there. So looking at it, through your lens, your take on it is we're still seriously lacking understory.
Yeah, I would say, if you can look through the woods and you can see 50, 60, 70 yards, 100 yards, your stem count's real low.
Right.
Right now, we found some other spots where your stem count
was up,
and it was good, and you could only see 20 yards, right? But those spots in here are few and far between. But probably what I would do is I would key in on those really thick areas and then go out to the edge of them where it starts to thin out and try to figure out a way to where you can expand on that thickness rather than just take a spot that has a huge canopy and try to maybe make that into a thick spot. Just try to expand on the thick that you already... Yeah. Yep. Because just coming down here on the four-wheeler now, off to my right, when we just got on the four-wheelers, as we were coming down that hill there was a spot where there was grapevines growing. There was some shorter stuff that was growing up. And, like, that was some specific bedding area right there that was below where your future food plot's going to be, which that's good. And if you could take that and try to expand that a little bit more, I think you've got something to work with.
Just keep growing that.
Keep growing that, yep.
Reducing canopy, stuff like that.
Because the more of these little pockets that you can create, the more layers that you can create within your property, that gives the deer more areas to go to, right? To find sanctuary, to hide, to eat, to browse, whatever it may be. And then come hunting season, the magical time where we want to be in the woods to kill a buck, right? That buck that maybe doesn't necessarily live here, but travels to your property, he's got that many more places that he has to investigate to actually see if something is there or has been there, and to a point where he can't visually look at it, he actually has to get in there and look at it. And that's just more time he's spending on the property,
makes sense.
Which ends up creating more hunting opportunities for you.
Right. Yeah, makes good sense. So what you've seen the food plots, like any recommendations or thoughts on what we ought to be planting?
I mean, I guess from my perspective is, we're up in the hills here. You're kind of limited on equipment that you can bring in here, things that you could probably get to grow in here. Summertime, you don't have to worry about feeding the deer in the summertime.
Yeah.
Nobody should worry about feeding the deer in the summertime. That's the least important time to try to feed the herd of deer. Mm-hmm. We're focused on, we're hunters, so we're doing this all for a purpose to harvest animals, right? Whether it's to shoot a doe to fill your freezer for your family or to kill a nice buck, right?
Right.
The goal is to get them there in the time of which we can actually hunt them. So summertime doesn't do us any good. So it doesn't really necessarily help the deer as much because they've already got enough food on the landscape to support themselves. So if you could focus more on those fall food plot blends, I would lean more towards a blend of something like that with your brassicas in there.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think we've tried to look more at blends just because, like in the past, there'd be times we'd plant like one thing, right? And we mix two, but I think one of the things that I've read and heard on is the more diversity you have, like you have like, and you said it today when we were out on our visit, you said what's not their favorite today, 2 weeks from now at a different stage of growth, then they're hitting that.
Mm-hmm.
So having multiple species, and the bull meadow, I should have saved the container. Maybe I did. I'd have to go down to the garage see if I find it. But we put in something there that was just like, Jimmy bought it online. It had a combination of everything from buckwheat to chicory to pork. I mean, it was just like everything in there. And flowering. I mean, it was a great mix, a diverse blend, super diverse. And it did pretty good. There's nothing left though. Now I got to do something with it. I need to establish something else in there. And Mike has a strong desire to have a winter feed. And understandably, we go over to the neighbors and go for a walk, and during deer season, and the deer out in the middle of the day digging up his beets or whatever he's got out there.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike's like, find out what he's planting and plant that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Why not?
They obviously like it, and it grows up here.
Yeah.
So I do.
That's the key
is my neighbor.
What will grow, right? Like, what's the condition of the soil? What ways do you need to augment the soil conditions to make it optimal to grow whatever you're trying to grow? And then just trying to find something that the deer are going to want to eat, but make it diverse enough to where they have to spend some time in there foraging for what they want at that particular time, right? a deer is the same sense as our kids, right? One week they're liking something, the next week they're liking something else.
Yeah, they're on to the next.
They're on to the next thing. Yeah. So if you can create as maximum amount of diversity as possible, that's the thing to key in on.
Yeah, nice. I had a really good thought and I just lost it. Oh, we were talking about the size of the plots, and I got a couple that are a little over half acre. I got one that's half acre, and then little like quarter acre. So, I mean, if you add it all up, when you look at proportionate to the property, timbered, swampland, everything that we got here from the low part of the property to the high part of the property, but we have a very small percentage of food plot.
Yes.
So, we can't look at that and go, we are making a difference feeding these deer. Because as you said, during the summer, they're fine. They'll find food. There's food everywhere, right? But what we do create is the edges. And you had said earlier in our conversation that, the deer are an edge animal. They like those edges. It changes. And that's, we're seeing a lot of that. But it's interesting because like our neighbor who successfully grows a winter feed has, I don't know how many acres, but if I had to guess, I'd say 6 acres out of his 35 or something. And then next to that is another neighbor's property that it's not food plots, but they're kind of like hay lots or grass lots, so they just keep mowed. Mm-hmm. But the point is, they're like, you get over here and there's like very small little focus, and this takes nothing for them to eat us right down to dirt.
Right.
And then I never get the maturity in my beets or my brassicas, So it's hard. We have to figure that out, and whether
it's just gonna come through experimentation.
Yeah, we have to
time.
Just figure out what is the key to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it all comes down to it, if you plant something there and it doesn't work out, you can always go back in and put some winter rye in there.
Yeah.
And it's gonna grow.
Yeah,
It'll grow in the wintertime. If it gets some sunlight and the ground warms up a little bit, it'll grow in the wintertime.
Do they eat the winter rye or only the cereal rye?
No, they'll eat it.
Will they?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And you had mentioned using that to like grow up and thicken up in a plot and then overseeding and crushing that.
Crush that down, turn that into your organics. Let that build the soil for you.
Right, and that's why even though maybe we don't have the best winter plots, maybe we do a couple strips through them and we put some winter feed in. Mm-hmm. But I really like the idea that we're not tearing up our soils once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Killing everything.
It's not necessary.
And then tilling. I think the loss outpaces any gains.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Because, once you start tilling, you bring up that native seed bed that's there, which
could dormant,
could be more weed seeds, right?
Yeah.
Something that you don't want. And then plus you're taking that organic that once was at the top layer and now you're rolling it down deeper into the ground.
Yeah.
You're removing that moisture that was built up in there. You're chopping up God knows how many worms, right? Which is your friend. You want as many worms in your soil as possible.
Keep that aerated and
yep.
everything.
And then, the longer you can keep a root into the ground, the less erosion you have, the better air and the better moisture you can get to go deeper into it. And the more you keep building that organic layer up, the more root structure you will force down into the ground, which will drive that organic layer even deeper. And it comes to a point where you're not going to need fertilizers. You're not going to need to spray as much or anything like that, just depending on what you want to switch it up to at that point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what I noticed last year with, I think we did till the bowl meadow to put that blend in, but other than that, everything was we didn't do any tilling and no spraying. Mm-hmm. And the deer were all over the food plot. So it's like, and you go back a couple of years where we did spray and kill, we terminated at whatever was growing. We tilled it, we planted it, fertilizer, lime, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yep.
And the deer activity was like the same as it was last year.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why am I beating myself up, spending the time and money to do
giant investment of time and money and equipment and hassle.
It's like, no.
It's not necessary sometimes.
No.
Yep.
So, getting close to time to wrap up, and but I see you got like a booklet here. Is this like a sample of what you might give a customer?
Yeah. So typically, what I'll do with a customer is I'll give them, I'll print out some maps of their property for all their acreages, and it'll have a zoomed out version and a zoomed in version, so we can see how their property ties into their neighboring properties.
Makes sense.
We can see all the different access points, some different topography features and stuff like that. And then from there, we can develop a plan and stuff like that. So I've got a template here that we could go through, the customer can go through, and we can take notes in here, and we can keep track of what our goals are, what we're targeting, what we want to try to accomplish with the property. And this is basically a living document, right? So over time, you go back and you put notes in there of what you did, what you want to do in the future, what's working, what's not working. And it's just a way to manage it for yourself. And then at the same time, I've got like this curated booklet of different things of, you know, the deer themselves, their habitat that they live in, and stuff like that, of a book that I had that I've gone through and found a lot of the necessary stuff that we should do, that any hunter should know, whether it's talking about access, different terrain features, it's talking about wind direction, different stuff like that. So you can go through and you can read that and see how this could apply to your property, right? Because every property is completely different, right? Whether it's your property here, down here in Naples, or it's somebody up in Spencerport in Genesee County in the Virgin Swamp or something like that, you know, different techniques are useful for different areas, right? And different.
So it's just like, it's like knowing what all the tools are that are in the box and when to use, on what property to use what tool on, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And the thing is, for you hunting down here, right? It's not easy, right? Like, yeah, you've been successful here and hunting's been pretty good for you, but if you take this and compare this to some hunting, say in like, I don't know, Livingston County on some farmland somewhere, completely different, right? Deer movement patterns are completely different. The way they utilize the landscape is completely different because they don't have those ag fields to play off of necessarily.
Right.
Yep. So my goal is to try to get as much information from the client as possible.
Yep.
Have them give me all their historical information, and then from there, look at the property, give them my perspective, right? Because as we talked earlier, you've been here for so many years now that you're almost ingrained into a pattern for the way in which you hunt the property. And we've talked about it a couple times now where, you know, anybody that's spent enough time in the woods in their tree stand knows that time where, man, my tree stand should be 15 yards over there. I keep seeing them move over there. And then either you make the move or you don't. But then if you think about that on a year-to-year basis of how you keep hunting the place, right? Those deer could be moving 30 yards away, and you don't know it because you've never investigated it, or you're too focused, right, on that one specific way that you're either accessing or hunting it, that kind of eliminates you from that possible success that's actually there. You're just not
right in front of you. You're not seeing it.
You're just not tuned into it, right?
Yeah, like the, you know, there's that old saying that says if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's a value. Like I would say to any land, like, and I told you this when we were out there. I don't know if we were recording, but like, you spend a week here, you're not going to know this land like I know it, right? However, you're looking at it all through a different lens. You're seeing something different in your short time here. You're like, oh, point out this, that, movements, and it's like, you know, that's a good point. So there's a tremendous value, and I would say to anybody listening, if you have your own hunting property, you know, to have somebody come in with that fresh perspective, looking through a different lens. And like you said, I'm very much ingrained, and so is my brother. We just always do the same thing. And I can tell you that he'll get on the ATV and he'll go across there and he'll go up the hill. He's going to go back there and he's either going to go to that spot or that spot because that's what he's done for years. And he is a very successful hunter. But we just do the same thing. So, you know, by like how much do you change the property? And I think that's like we're doing all the things to increase stem density, and we're thinning and clear cutting, and like I showed you some spots that are a couple years old and we haven't hinge cut them yet, right? I should have been in there hinge cutting them this past winter. That, like, I think that's where a written plan is very valuable. when I told you I got a plan over here that I showed you earlier that I participated with, I don't know, it wasn't state, it was Federal Forest Service or whatever. But anyways, there was a plan initiative, right? And there was certain steps that I committed to doing and completing, and we had a timeline on it. And this work had to be done. I had to have photos of the work, verify, put together, submit a report, and I got paid for doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a written plan since. That's the problem. We're all like, on the phone driving to and from work. You're like, hey, what do you think about a plan?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there'd be a value to us having a written plan.
100%, yeah.
Even just amongst ourselves to use. No government agency.
No, yeah.
Just like, here's what we're going to do. And Jimmy and I have been talking about this. It's like we have to take our plans for the food plots and have a written plan that we want to do X, Y, and Z. And here's our timelines. You know what I mean? And I think you have a better likelihood of completing the work if you stick to that plan.
But the thing is it doesn't all have to be done at once.
Right.
Or nor should it, right? There should be different stages of sectional growth in different spots of your property, right? So some spots are older growth. Mm-hmm. Some spots are mid-growth. Some spots are super young, right? Because then that just enhances that diversity even more than what you already have.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of it, is having those multiple layers. That's what you talked about before. Would you call it having was it layers, the term used? Yeah.
Layering effect, yep.
Yeah, the layering effect of the property. So, I mean, awesome stuff. And I appreciate you spending I don't know, what we've been going at it for over 5 hours.
Hey, that's all part of the deal. That's how it works. It takes time.
It's just so cool to sit down with you and talk. I see you had some notes there. Did we hit everything you wanted?
Yeah, we pretty much hit everything on here that I wanted to get to. The biggest thing is what does the landowner want, right? What are their needs? How can I fit to meet their needs, right? Not everybody's got $1 million budget to get all kinds of equipment and hire crews to come in, right? That's not even necessary, right? You only need to do as much as you need to do to enhance it a little bit. And a lot of people, they've got a great spot. They've got great deer on the property. It all comes down to access, times that they're hunting, and the way that they're hunting it. And with a little bit of enhancements that anybody could do, they could turn their property into some place that for generations to come could be really successful on.
We've already had multiple generations here, and we want to keep that going,
Mm-hmm.
But so if you had to tell me the top 2 things that suggestions you would have for me here on the property after your short visit.
Number 1 would probably be thicken it up, right? Make some more edges in there. Probably drop some trees in a way that creates barriers, that creates screens, and then probably find those deer paths that are close to your tree stands and eliminate them and terminate them and try to steer the deer in the direction that needs to accomplish of getting closer to you.
Getting closer to that deer.
Yep. Yeah. And anything that you can do on that stand location to get them to hang around just a little bit longer. So if you've got a spot or your stand is in a good spot where you can put a licking branch or a scrape area.
I thought you would say a salt block.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. But if you could have a spot where you could have that grapevine hanging down and then terminate all the other scrapes and licking branches around there, they will key in on that spot and give you that shot opportunity for just a little bit longer.
Just buying you that little bit of time.
Yep, because that's what it comes down to is we're in the tree for so long waiting for that, minute, if we're lucky, for them to pass through our shooting lane.
And that little sliver of time.
Just that little sliver of time.
Right spot. Do you ever hear, there was a podcast I heard this on, but the guy was telling the story about his 5-gallon bucket. He called it the 5-gallon bucket buck or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear the story? He was hunting a food plot, and this buck kept coming out, and it was feeding, probably close to bedding. It would come out, maybe because of the wind, was scent checking, but it just fed in one corner and wouldn't come over, wouldn't offer him the shot. And so the guy went back the next day, and he had a 5-gallon bucket, and he set it down like 25 yards in front of him. A white 5-gallon bucket, flipped it upside down and just set it down. And that buck came out and saw that bucket and came over to investigate. And the guy ended up getting his shot.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the deer was like, looked over and said, what in the hell?
What is that?
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what, and that's like what you're saying is like sometimes you need just a little something to get the deer to pause or to come over and check things out, you know?
Yep.
So, I mean, a licking branch that you manufacture probably be more fun than a 5-gallon bucket. But,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
But it made me think of that the
Yeah.
guy put a 5-gallon bucket out there and it lured the deer in just out of curiosity, you know?
Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes for where your camera placements are. If you can create something there to get them to pause just a little bit longer, they'll spend more time in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And especially if you put that on a licking branch or a scrape area, something that's some sort of communication hub, you're more likely to get a better, more consistent picture of whatever's passing through there than just having a camera on a tree in a random
like in that family
spot.
stand plot. You know, we were talking in this one up here how many scrapes there was, but in the family stand plot, there's like 3 major points that they scrape.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about terminating a scrape.
Yep.
So like in that plot, we drove through there, but I didn't take time walking over to show you. But is that something you would suggest doing, is terminating 1 or 2 of those?
Yeah, if your goal was to set up near one of those spots to get a shot on that spot, I mean, I would eliminate them, because if the deer knows that there's a communication hub in there, but there's only one of them, the likelihood of them going to that spot is way better than if there's 3 or 4 different ones. Because maybe the likelihood of them going and checking every single one of them is very, very low. Right. But if there's just one of them there, and that's the only one within that spot, there's a very high likelihood that he's going to go there and see if his buddy Jimmy was there the day before. Yeah.
Cool. All right, what else you got before we wrap up? Anything else that we're missing?
I think that's it. I mean, my goal is to just, try to create more success for the landowner, really, and just, see how I can improve it for them. Give them things to do in the future, just little keys on what they might be missing. But if anybody wants to get a hold of me, they can go to my website, Hasler Habitat Solutions.com. Hasler spelled Hasler. You can also go to webhhs.com, check out my website, fill out the intake form. I'll get an email notification that you're interested in the services and what you're looking for. I'll reach out to you. We'll have a discussion, and we'll just go from there. If anybody wants to give me a call or text, 585-245-3875. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody on the phone.
And we'll put your contact information in, I'll have Billy put it in on the podcast rollout,
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I'm totally impressed with your perspective, but even more so with your level of knowledge and creativity with how you're thinking about these things, I mean, it's especially, there's people that go to college for years to try and learn this stuff, and biologists and everything, but it's just like, can't bullshit a bullshitter, right? But so I see, like, I'm what you're saying is legit. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So I'm very
Appreciate
impressed, and I can't thank you enough for coming up and spending the time here with me and jumping on the podcast, and hopefully we drum up a little business for you. But
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good conversation, and this is a time of year for folks to be thinking about habitat and property management, ahead of deer season. So
all that time you spent in your deer stand thinking, what should I be doing different?
Well,
now's the time to figure it out.
Yep, call Hasler Habitat Solutions.
That's right.
All righty.
Hey,
Thanks,
thank you.
Cal. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Keep feeding them.
Yep.